and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 265, and today's date is January 16th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Experts Are Warning the Threat of Al-Qaeda Endangers the Homeland. And in my other reports, I've reported on many times how all the senators, how Congress is out there, all DHS is out there, all letting us know that Al-Qaeda is back and they are stronger than ever. And they're building the case because they are going to need some type of an event to bring us into the Middle East again and bring troops in, and they need this to cover up the economic collapse that is coming. And we do understand that they've been telling us that this Al-Qaeda factions have broken off into lone wolf groups, and they're running around the U.S., and they can't really track them, and they don't communicate like they used to, and we have Al-Qaeda coming in from the north across the Canadian borders, and DHS, they said they've lost track of them, but a lot of them are bomb makers, and they've been telling us this for quite a while, and they've been building this up, and of course they picked different people out. Yesterday I reported on an Al-Qaeda operative that everyone fears, and there was another one called the Syrian that's in Syria, and they're trying to build this up, and they're trying to get a face onto Al-Qaeda just like they did with Osama bin Laden, and they're going to use this as the event that is going to allow them to take the focus off the Fed and the government when the collapse happens and put this onto either a country where these Al-Qaeda factions are coming out of, and this way we can get into war, and this will cover up the economic collapse. And we'll get into that a little bit later in this report, but let's get into the economic collapse news and see what's going on around the world here. We're going to head out to Australia, and again, Australia, they are starting to feel the same thing that every other country is starting to feel. And right now, Australia reported that in December, employment fell around 22,000 jobs, and they expected a 10,000 gain in jobs. And this report goes on to say, driven by a 31,600 plunge in full-time jobs, offset by an increase of 9,000 in part-time jobs. So we can see what is happening right here. People are losing their work, their full-time work, and the only way they can survive is to find these part-time jobs. And this is not just happening in Australia, it is happening in Europe, and it's happening in the United States, and in the UK, in Canada, and we're all seeing the same exact thing. And this is spreading across the globe. Any private Western central bank country who relies on loaning out this money with interest to be paid back is having a problem. Most of these countries are in debt and have very high unemployment. And to get more of this money, what they need to do is lay off, impose austerity, and then they're allowed to go into more debt. And this is just creating more and more problems, because as you know, you just bring it back to your home, and if you are bringing in $30,000 a year, or let's say $50,000 a year, and you have credit card debt of $100,000, and you continually add and bring in more credit cards without bringing in more revenue, what happens? It cannot be sustained. The same thing is happening in every single country. Now, in Europe right now, the European car market is enduring its longest slump ever. This is the 6th straight year of contraction in 2013. EU car sales shrank by 1.7% last year to 11.8 million, the lowest level since 1995, a 26% contraction from 2007. And again, the Europeans, when you look around and you see 20%, you see 30%, you see 50% unemployment, who in their right mind is going out and purchasing these cars? Nobody is, and it's starting to show everywhere. Now, here in the U.S., of course, we have the illusion. We have the stock market, we have the S&P, we have the NASDAQ, we have the Dow, all hitting all-time new highs. Yes, the market did come down a little bit today, but they are all at all-time highs right now, and they want everyone to look at this. And then we have the manipulated numbers, and of course, yesterday I just reported that they are changing the way they calculate inflation. They've changed the way they calculate GDP, and they've already changed the way they calculate unemployment. Of course, they have to change the calculations because when the illusion doesn't fit reality, they need to change everything, and this is what they're doing right now. But we look past this, and we like to go to the nuts and bolts of what is really going on. And yesterday we saw J.C. Penney laying off people, closing 33 stores. We saw Macy's closing 5 stores and laying off like 2,000 or 2,500 people. And this is continuing across the country. Why? Because unemployment is really not 6.7%. Unemployment is really closer to 30% in the U.S. But it's all masked and it's all an illusion, and they don't want you to see any of this. But it shows up in the data. I mean, they are telling us that the sales for this holiday season are up and things are doing well. And if you look around at all the news, this is what they're telling us. But then you see Sears, their sales fell by 9.2%. Okay, this is proof. Every single store is showing a decline in sales. Why? Because people have part-time work. People do not have work, and they do not have the disposable income. And in one of my previous reports, I showed that the disposable income has dropped, and it's in the negative range right now. And even H.H. Gregg, which is an electronic store, their sales declined. I think it was like 11%. Best Buy is out there saying their sales have plummeted and are abysmal during the holiday season. And sales at stores open at least 14 months were down around 0.9% in the U.S. They were expected to rise by 2%. Revenues fell by 2.6%. And you have to remember, they had sales going on like 40%, 50% off of the price of each of the electronics, and they couldn't even make a profit doing this. And most of the stores were handing and promoting huge discounts. And with these huge discounts, they couldn't make ends meet. They couldn't get the sales needed. And again, this goes back to the people do not have the money to spend. When I was shopping in the stores, I looked around. The shelves were completely full. Now, I remember when I was a kid, I'm 48 right now. When I was younger, I went to the store with my parents. The shelves were wiped out. You could not find anything. I went to the mall. People were parked on the grass. You couldn't find parking anywhere. I went to the mall. Now, no problem with parking. People weren't even in the store. And of course, the news came out later that foot traffic in the mall was down by 14% or so. And we can see this, happening all over the place. And of course, Best Buy is coming out and they're saying they're surprised by consumer electronic market declined in December. And Best Buy said price cutting will continue in January. But of course, because all of these retailers have channel stuffed automobile manufacturers, channel stuffed dealers, and they need to get rid of all the merchandise. And they're having a very tough time doing this right now. And Best Buy also says the highest discounts are on TV, mobile phones, and computers. They just cannot move these devices because people just don't have the money to go out and buy them. Even if they slash the prices 40, 50, 60%, people are not running out and buying it because they have other places where they need to put their money for food, for rent, for clothing, things they need right now. Now, I talk a lot about home sales, about real estate, and we've seen mortgage applications plunging. I reported on all the main mortgage dealers out there have reduced the amount of people working, like Wells Fargo, Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America. have all reduced the amount of people working in their mortgage divisions. A lot of smaller mortgage companies have closed. Why? Because no one's taking out mortgages. And of course, now they're coming back and they're introducing the ARMs, the adjustable rate mortgages, and I reported on that before. And right now, home builder sentiment slips as buyer traffic completely tumbles. And this is a 4-month slide in prospective buyer traffic, is the largest since 2010, and has dropped to its weakest since May 2013. And again, if people are not working and people have part-time jobs and they do not have disposable income, they are not going out buying huge, large ticket items. They're just not doing it. And I tell you, these government officials, these bankers, they're all shocked. Like, I don't understand. The unemployment has come down, but we're doing worse. Well, because the government is manipulating these numbers, and these people actually believe these statistics instead of believing what is really happening in the economy. But we saw this in 1929. We saw the market rise to all-time new highs, and back then it was 400 points, and people didn't look at the economy at all. They pretend nothing was happening. Europe was a disaster. They were in a recession/depression, and what are we seeing right now? Basically the same thing. It's like looking in the mirror and we're seeing the same thing happen all over again, but this time it is going to be 10 times worse. Now, the Fed is out there and they're saying that it is possible and could be probable that we go into a deep recession. And this is from Fed President John Williams, and he presented a paper on monetary policy, and he said recent economic events are not rare or unprecedented, as many have characterized them. History teaches us that very large downturns are not only possible, but they are probable. When looked at through the lens of the post-war U.S. experience, the depth and duration of the recent recession may appear extraordinary, he said. However, a broader look at economic history and events around the world teach us that deep and long-lasting downturns are not that rare. And what he's saying, and it's amazing how they use this. I mean, when I work and I have my manager talk to me and he just rambles on, I call it management babble. And when the Fed talks, I call it Fed babble. Basically, they don't like to tell you right out that we're heading towards a downturn, that things are looking really bad. So what they end up doing is they like to babble on about all different things, and what they're really saying is, yeah, we know what's happening. A recession and a very deep depression is headed our way, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. And by the way, we're taking all of your wealth at this time, and there's nothing you can do about it. And hey, look at the stock market. Why doesn't more people get in there? Because Goldman Sachs is telling everyone to get in there. Now, right now, the Fed owns 64% more U.S. government debt than China. And I know it's been around the news saying China has been buying up the debt of the United States. And right now, if we really look at this, over the last 3 years, China has really added on about $100 billion worth of U.S. debt. And this only goes up to November, by the way. It doesn't go past that. This is all the U.S. government is reporting at this time. But if we really look at this, the Federal Reserve has $846 billion more than China. And from November until January, the Fed had $2.1 trillion of U.S. Treasuries, and now they have $2.2 trillion in Treasuries. So someone out there is not buying these Treasuries anymore, and the Fed needs to buy them. And what this shows me is that China is slowing down the pace that they're purchasing it. Japan is slowing down the pace. Russia's slowing down the pace. And a lot of these countries are slowing down. And the Fed needs to purchase more and more of these treasuries. Now, there was a Gallup poll, and it asks the questions, are you better off now than last year financially? And right now, 42% of Americans said they're worse off financially than they were last year, compared to 35% who feel they're better off. So right now, everything is starting to change. The percentage of people who feel worse off is getting higher and higher. And 22% of respondents said their financial situation has stayed the same, which I can understand, because if you've had a job and you're making the same income, you really don't see the effect of anything because you're making the same income. Maybe you haven't received raises and things like that, but you're really not that affected. Those people who've lost their jobs, who've had to find a part-time job, who've lost work and were making a certain salary and had to drop, $20,000, $30,000 in salary, are seeing a different picture at this time. And as time goes through this year, 2014, it is going to get worse and worse and worse. Okay, now let's move on to Obamacare here. As you know, I am not a fan of Obamacare. I don't believe it's for the people. This has nothing to do with Democrat or Republican. I believe if the government is going to do something, it has to be a benefit to the people. And a benefit to the people is not taxing them. A benefit of the people is not penalizing them. And a benefit to the people is giving them something that they can actually use to protect their health. And what we were giving crap. That's what we've been given. We've been given policies that are very expensive, that have very high deductibles, that do nothing for us. And if we don't want them, we're taxed. If we do take them, they're hidden taxes within Obamacare. So this whole entire Obamacare, which is the Affordable Care Act for those people who don't know, is based on taxes to raise revenue for the government and the insurance companies. This is all it is. It is nothing else. And right now, the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services official Gary Coden couldn't tell Representative Timothy Murphy when the Obamacare website payment system would be completed. The automated process for payments is still being built, but we have a process in place that is working, and payments will be going out next week. And this goes on to say you have an anticipated date when it's going to be built? And Murphy asked, and basically he said, I don't have an answer to that, and it's just not working right now, and we are still building it. This entire system was pushed out on the American people. It doesn't work. The website doesn't work. There are a huge amount of flaws, and all they did when they pushed out Obamacare, they gave us this fancy website with flames on the outside, fancy graphics, and that is it. The internal workings of the website do not work. But again, the people that were doing the website are friends of Michelle Obama's. They got millions and millions of dollars, and nothing works at all. And right now, a white hacker, David Kennedy, says Obamacare website security has deteriorated since last November. Actually, it's gotten worse than it was when it first was rolled out. In fact, Kennedy said many of the vulnerabilities have actually gotten worse. One identified security flaw could potentially allow a hacker to upload a malicious code and commandeer other users' computers. The site is fundamentally flawed in ways that make it dangerous to people who use it, and he is suggesting that people actually don't use it because your information, your financial information, could be taken, and it could be used to take money out of your account, and it could take passwords from you, it could take your identity from you, and it should not be used at this time. Now, it came out today, and this really shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. It wasn't a surprise to me. NSA is collecting millions of text messages daily, and in an untargeted global sweep. So they're just going out, taking everyone's text messages. And the program called Dishfire sweeps up pretty much everything it can. The National Security Agency has collected almost 200 million text messages a day from across the globe, using them to extract data including location, contact networks, credit card details, according to its top secret documents. On average, each day, the NSA was able to extract the following: more than 5 million missed call alerts for use in contact training analysis, someone's social network from whom they contact and when, details of 1.6 million border crossings a day from network roaming alerts, more than 110,000 names from electronic business cards, which also included the ability to extract and save images, over 800,000 financial transactions either through text-to-text payments or linking credit cards to phone users. So what is the NSA doing? They are spying on every single person. They know exactly what you're doing, and they are doing this every single day. Obama is out there, and he had a special panel investigating the NSA, and I'm going to tell you what is going to happen. Absolutely nothing. NSA is going to be expanded. They're going to spy on more. They're going to put more technology in there. They need to keep track of what everyone is doing. They need this information to blackmail judges, to blackmail congressmen, to blackmail other people in other nations. They need it to keep track of the U.S. people, to make sure they are not a threat to their authority, and if they are, they will be put on a list, and later when the collapse comes and the brigades are out there, the DHS brigades are out there with local law enforcement helping them, they will pick you up and bring you to wherever they need to bring you to make sure you are not a threat to their power. Now, the Custom and Border Protection have been loaning their drones out. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the law enforcement agency created as a division of the Department of Homeland Security, flew nearly 700 surveillance missions on behalf of other federal as well as state and local law enforcement agencies. And these figures came from the flight logs released recently in response to a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit filed by the Electronic Frontier Foundation and Civil Liberties Group. Among the federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies who were borrowing the drones were the FBI, ICE, U.S. Marshals, Coast Guard, and many others. The EFF report also noted that as drones equipment becomes more sophisticated, they will be able to utilize facial recognition software to identify individuals from aloft. And this goes back into the spying. They'll have these drones flying around. They will recognize who you are. It will be transferred back to the federal database. It will be linked up to your DNA information, linked up to your real ID, linked up to every single possible information of all the transactions and everything you've done, so they can track you and they know exactly where you are and where you're going. They can keep these drones up in the air, keep you and follow you wherever you go, and this is the reason they are doing this. And this report also said, which raised red flags, that several branches of the military were using these drones. And this goes on to say, for what lawful purpose could the armed forces be conducting such operations domestically? Furthermore, the likelihood is high that such activities run afoul of the Posse Comitatus Act, which prohibits the U.S. military from performing domestic law enforcement duties within the United States. Okay, now the U.S. military is beginning to purchase and testing smart rifles. One of the rifles demonstrated at a show boasts a 70% first shot success rate at 1,000 yards out, and these weapons cost between $10,000 and $27,000. And these rifles, once a target is tagged, the bullets are smart enough to follow the tag. And right now, the rifles can even communicate with each other. We can enable a more information-driven combat in the sense that you can tag targets, you can pass off those targets to someone else with a scope. There's a whole layer of communication that comes with having a rifle that can designate and track targets. And basically, they've been receiving a huge amount of requests for demonstrations because they're looking, these demonstrations lead into purchases, and guess what? 30 law enforcement agencies within the United States are requesting demonstrations, and I'm sure they'll be putting all of these smart rifles on order because it will be much easier for them to hit the target once the targets are tagged. And think about it. If the DHS purchases, or I should say when they purchase this rifle, they have these rifles and they have a team coming at you. All of these rifles can communicate with each other, and the target that has been tagged can be passed between the rifles. And let's say someone is out of range or can't see something, they can pass the target along, they can see it in their scope, and boom, that's it. This is very scary of what is coming down the pike here. Okay, let's move on here. Now, lawmakers in Catalonia demand a referendum on independence from Spain. Lawmakers in the northeastern Spanish region of Catalonia voted Thursday to demand powers to hold a referendum on an independence from Spain, ramping up their confrontation with a central government determined to avoid the breakup of the country. The vote was largely symbolic because the Spanish government has repeatedly said that it considers any gesture toward them succeeding from Spain is completely unconstitutional, and that it would block any such moves. But the people of Catalonia are pushing forward, and they're saying this is actually the first step, and we have to realize that Catalonia is bigger than the EU member states such as Ireland, Denmark, and Finland. Its economy is about the same size as Portugal, representing about 1/5 of Spain's 1.5 trillion gross domestic product. So they are really actually trying to push this right now, and we'll have to see how far that goes. Now, today in Spain, in Madrid, there were protests over government spending. Rallies that started in the Spanish city have spread nationwide, including Madrid, leading to 14 arrests in the capital. The initial protest was because of a costly government project that quickly went kind of crazy, because again, when people are trying to survive and they do not have work and there's a huge amount of austerity and people can't make ends meet, people get pissed off, especially when they hear their government spending millions of euros on things they actually don't need. And the protest in Madrid quickly turned into a riot, resulting in several dozen of the more radical protesters clashing with police. The initial reason to protest was a state finance project to turn a street district into a boulevard, while the parking lot was to be removed underground and turned into one people would have to pay to use. But that issue is compounded by an overall dissatisfaction with the government spending on a multi-million euro project at times of great economic adversity and when other social projects were not taken up. And people just got pissed off because they saw their government wasting all this money while the people of Spain were suffering. And we're seeing the same thing here in the U.S., that the government spends billions and billions of dollars with aid to Syria, billions of dollars to Egypt, billions of dollars to Israel, billions of dollars to all these countries that the U.S. went in and created these circumstances in these countries, and now we're sending billions of dollars to aid because of what the U.S. government central bankers have done. For example, in Syria, the U.S. central bankers backed the rebels that were fighting against Assad, and now they're sending aid to the Syrian people. And they're not looking here inward in the United States because they don't care about the people in the United States. They only care about spreading their central banking across the world. And of course, it just makes me very angry that they can spend billions of dollars of aid and funding to go to Africa, to Sudan, to Central Africa, to the Middle East, and they're having a tough time to pass the extension of unemployment benefits to the people in the United States who are suffering. It makes no sense. Well, it does make sense because they're not interested in the people of the United States, and of course with the illusion of the unemployment and the government congressmen, senators believing all of this, and most of them, we have to think of it this way. The government is supposed to represent the people. When we look at the senators and a lot of the congressmen and the people in the government, they've come into government and they become very, very wealthy. And there was a report that, I don't know if most of you've seen, that most of them come in, they are not wealthy. They spend some time in government and they become multimillionaires. This is not a representation of the people of the United States, because they are completely out of touch. I mean, if you look at President Obama, he has made millions upon millions of dollars being the president. I'm sorry. This is not how it's supposed to work. This is not how the founding fathers envisioned the government, where you go into government, you get insider information, and you make deals with other people, and you become wealthy, and you are not representing the vast majority of the people of the United States. And they are completely out of touch of what is really going on. But I digress, and I get off track here, and let's get back on track. Now, Germany right now is seeking a no-spy pact among EU members. Germany has hosted confidential EU talks for months to forge a non-spying pact among its member states, a drive opposed especially by Britain, a newspaper reported on Wednesday. And again, I can't even believe that they have to actually come up with a pact that they're not going to spy on each other. That means they all have been spying on on each other. That's what actually that means. And now they're saying, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be doing this anymore. But I'm going to tell you right now, the United States, the central bankers, England, they're not going to stop their spying. They're going to continue with their spying. Now, Iran is calling the U.S. bluff, because we understand that senators right now are trying to push forward this sanctions bill. Right now, it's not moving anywhere. Sanctions on Iran, and the U.S. sanctions against Iran over its nuclear program produce no positive outcomes. And if U.S. lawmakers manage to impose more of those, despite President Obama's position, they will not like the consequences, warned Iranian's foreign minister. And right now, I know everyone believes that these sanctions, forced Iran into these nuclear talks and these peace talks, but they really didn't do anything. They were making deals with many other countries using gold, bartering, and they were actually joining the BRIC nations, where the sanctions actually had no bearing on Iran. And right now, the foreign minister also said if they believe the sanctions are so important, then they can test it and see the consequences. I don't think the consequences would be something that they would like, he said. And again, I do not believe that this deal, this peace talks, is really peace that the United States is looking for. Again, their tactics have changed, their goals have not. The goals are the same. The central bankers need to get into Iran, replace the government, put their natural resources on the U.S. dollar. The same thing in Syria. This is why the U.S. is in Africa right now. And we can see that they are losing the battle all across the Middle East. The people are rising up. They want their countries back. They're taking control of the oil fields, of the ports, and this is why you see the puppet regimes out there saying, listen, if you sell the oil, we will sink the tankers. If you sell the oil for anything besides the U.S. dollar, there's going to be problems. Now, Cisco is out there, and they are warning that there is an unprecedented growth in cyber attacks. And cyber attacks rose 14% last year. Cisco said there has been unprecedented growth in advanced attacks, with every large company it monitored becoming a target for malicious traffic. And their whole mantra here is to say that you have to assume that the attackers are already in your network. And this is being pushed out there because we're seeing so many attacks occur. They've been ramping up, and in the last two and a half years, they've been pushing the idea of cyber attacks. We're seeing Target being hit. We're seeing other Neiman Marcus and other retailers being hit. We're seeing Adobe being hit. They're letting us know that the power grid is very vulnerable, and they are all building this up for the doomsday cyber attack, which eventually will be happening, because they will definitely need it, because they understand that the economy is completely collapsing. And to keep this up and to keep us thinking that cyber attacks are coming from other countries, the Syrian Electronic Army threatens Microsoft with more hack attacks. Microsoft has confirmed that the Syrian Electronic Army has successfully hacked into several Microsoft employee email accounts. This is on top of taking control of Microsoft News Twitter account last weekend and posting several anti-Microsoft tweets. And it is not over for Microsoft, because, of course, the hacking group posted this tweet of warning: "We didn't finish our attack on Microsoft yet. Stay tuned for more. The Syrian Electronic Army." And we can see they are pushing the agenda forward. They are letting everyone know that these attacks are coming from other countries, and they need this right now. They need to plant this in every American's head. They need to make sure that you understand that the attacks are coming from China, that they're coming from North Korea, that they're coming from Syria, and they're coming from Iran. But right now they downplayed Iran right now, and they're building this up with Syrian Electronic Army. And they keep this in front of us because when the cyber attack hits, and it will, they need another country to blame this on, and they're going to say, because of this, this brought down the economy. We were on the verge of recovery, and look what happened. And this is how they're going to pump up QE, because they cannot continually taper, because this is not a real economy. This is an illusion which was made up by the Fed and the U.S. government. And we're also seeing that we understand that the military is being purged right now, and we're seeing that 34 nuclear missile launch officers have now been implicated in a cheating scandal. The Air Force says 34 nuclear missile launch officers have been implicated on a cheating scandal and have been stripped of their security clearance. And this, so far, there's around 200 officers that have been removed from high-ranking positions, a lot of them in the nuclear weapons system area, and we see this going forward, and this is what is happening right now. As we know, the government has been letting us know that Al-Qaeda has been running around. They're in lone wolf packs. We can't track them. They're bomb makers, and they've been spreading this all around. And we saw in the Middle East, they locked down the Middle East because of terror threats. They locked down the Sudan because of terror threats. And now in the Sochi Olympics, the FBI is there, and there's a terrorist threat alert there, and a U.S. travel advisory going on right now. And as this report says, the experts are warning that ignoring the threat of Al-Qaeda endangers the homeland and everything around us. So we need to keep an eye on this. And there's a security hearing that happened on Wednesday saying that Al-Qaeda is a real threat in the U.S., that they are getting larger and bigger, and they need to take this seriously, that they are a very serious threat to the U.S. infrastructures like the power grid, the water, and they're also a threat to citizens overseas, and they are loosely affiliated. And because what's happening is Al-Qaeda is breaking off. Some of them are saying that they're affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Some are using different names right now, and they're saying that some Al-Qaeda-inspired groups and members, like the Internet-inspired Saranov brothers, are a major national security threat at home and abroad, and the terror threat has now morphed and changed within the United States. And again, these threats are real. It is now a loosely affiliated horizontal threat. I don't know exactly what that means. Many of those groups are called Al-Qaeda. Some are, some aren't, but they're opportunistic, and they come together like cancer cells when necessary. And this is a huge growing threat, and we cannot let our guard down. They are in the country. We just don't know where they are, and they are really pushing this very hard. Now, the reason is because they are definitely planning some type of event. The only reason they are letting us know this, they are pushing this, is so when the time comes for this event to happen, we understand that it was Al Qaeda, it was the Assyrian Electronic Army. And of course, they're all going to try to connect this all together. And this way, the American people are going to believe, yes, we need to go into Syria because that's where they came from. Oh, we need to go into North Korea because that's where they came from. And they'll make whatever group up that they need, and they'll intertwine them, and they'll make everyone believe, just like they did when 9/11 happened, and how they said that Osama bin Laden fled to Afghanistan, and we had to send troops into Afghanistan. The same thing is going to happen, but this is going to be on a bigger, major scale. And I've talked about this over and over again, and we're reaching the point where something is definitely going to happen because they've been building this up. And I believe it's going to be something is going to happen in the Sochi Olympics. Every time they give this warning that there's a threat, and they put a travel advisory. I mean, they did this in the Middle East. They blanketed the whole area. They evacuated everyone from the embassies. This happened in August, if you remember, beginning of August. And they put a U.S. travel advisory that something's going to happen, it's terrible, and then all of a sudden we had this false flag event in Syria where the chemical attack happened, and all of a sudden the fleet of the United States poured into the Mediterranean, and we were about to strike. Okay, that happened at that time. And then all of a sudden in Sudan, we had this terrorist alert, a travel advisory in Sudan. They had to evacuate all the U.S. citizens, and all of a sudden a war broke out there, and now we need to send troops into the area. Now in the Middle East, what are we seeing? We're seeing that the Al-Qaeda is everywhere. They're spreading like a cancer to everywhere, and we've been told that when these people who've been fighting in Syria, in Iraq, and in Lebanon and Libya, when they come back to the States, they'll be radicalized, and these people will be able to create terror within the United States. And right now, we do have a warning in Russia of a terrorist threat. We do have a travel advisory for American citizens going to Sochi. We do have the FBI on the ground there, and that just leads me to believe that something is going to happen. And then after that, something will happen here in the United States. This is all playing into terror, terror, terror. We need to go to war. We need to cover up this collapse. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.